Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the third class of Comparative Philosophy of Death and Dying. In this lecture, we will talk about the tablet 4 to 8 of the Epic of Gilgamesh. In a previous lecture, we talked about the first 3 tablets of the same epic, and we examined the notion of tyranny and friendship in relation to the characteristics of the protagonist, Gilgamesh, also the creation and becoming of Enkidu. Now, if you remember the last lecture, we talked about the notion of friendship, and one of the qualifications for the nature of friendship in ancient Mesopotamian conception was to achieve a certain goal or to conquer certain difficulties to make eternal fame. Remember that? So Gilgamesh told Enkidu at the end of tablet 3 that we should conquer Hambaba. We should go to the forest of cedar and conquer this monster called Hambaba. That's where we ended last tablet. From tablet 4 onwards, we will see them making this journey and also how they are going to accomplish this eternal fame. So we will start to see some more development in relation to this story. Again, this lecture has 4 parts. In the first part, I would like to talk about the mountain, the image of the mountain in the dream, and also in the process of conquering Hambaba. Also, in the second section, I would like to talk about the notion of love and its relationship with wisdom. Third section, we'll talk about mortality. So this is where the concept of death comes in ancient Mesopotamian epic. And again, we will end with the concluding questions. So the first section, mountain. So before I talk about the journey to the forest of cedar in tablet 4, I would like to show you this image that I discovered last week. Remember, Enkidu was described as mighty as the rock from the sky. The symbolism of friendship as something that happens out of nowhere, and it shows this bright image of the meteor in the dark sky. Remember that? But also it has this sort of sense that it is going to leave a mark in the history of human existence. So friendship is about accomplishing the project that is so great that the people would continue talking about in the rest of the history. So the symbolism of a meteor also has this sense of scratching the surface of the sky and leaving this bright mark behind that everyone will keep talking about. So it is. I think this is a great image of showing how the ancient Mesopotamian conception of friendship, not as a great accident in nature, but also it shows you a sense of accomplishment, a kind of image that you leave behind as you form a friendship with someone very important to you. Okay, that's the image that I wanted to share. Now, so let's take a look at how they make this journey to the forest of cedar. What you notice from the tablet 4 is this repetition. It is a kind of ritual that you see in tablet 4. Let me start reading from the beginning of tablet 4. At 20 leagues they broke bread. At 30 leagues they pitched camp. 50 leagues they traveled in the course of a day. By the third day, a march of a month and a half, nearer they drew to Mount Lebanon. Facing the sun they dug a well. They put fresh water in. Gilgamesh climbed to the top of the mountain. To the hill he poured out an offering of flour. O mountain, bring me a dream so I see a good sign. Enkidu made for Gilgamesh a house of the dream god. He fixed a door in its doorway to keep out the weather. In the circle he had drawn, he made him lie down, and falling flat like a net, lay himself in the doorway. So you see this image of friends supporting each other to go through this entire journey. But first you see Gilgamesh is making this ritual to nature and the mountain so that bring me a dream. In response to it, Enkidu is preparing this house of the dream god. Right? It is. You can imagine that it is a kind of a small cabin or a tent where Gilgamesh is going to sleep. It is a house of the dream god, or even a bed. It's possible. And then Enkidu, remember the image of Enkidu as being the shepherd. So he's lying down like a shepherd, German shepherd or watchdog, protecting his friend from enemies or weather in this case. I continue from tablet 4, line 13. Gilgamesh rested his chin on his knees. Sleep fell upon him that spills over people. In the middle of the night, he reached his sleep's end. He rose and spoke to his friend. My friend, did you not call me? Why have I awakened? Did you not touch me? Why am I startled? Did a god not pass by? Why is my flesh frozen numb? My friend, I have had the first dream. So you notice Gilgamesh is a kind of sitting down as he sleeps, and he puts his chin on his knees. So he's sitting down and sleeping, and suddenly he's yanked out of his dream. My friend, did you not call me? Suddenly he wakes up in the middle of the night. He reached his sleep's end. So he was deep asleep, and suddenly he's startled and he woke up. He said, I saw the first dream. Now this sequence takes place 5 times in this tablet. So you have these 5 dreams, and there's a repetition. First, we have to think about, again, the concept of dream. In the first lecture, we talked about how in ancient Mesopotamian tale, the movement from the dreams to reality is sort of back and forth. Sometimes dreams function as foreknowledge, vision of what is going to happen. Sometimes dreams are described as the state of unconsciousness in which we communicate with nature or communicate with the gods. So let's keep looking at the images that Gilgamesh provide. The first dream, this is tablet 4, line 22. The dream that I had was an utter confusion in a mountain valley. The mountain fell down on top of than we like. The bone in the wild knew how to give counsel. Enkidu spoke to his friend, gave his dream meaning. My friend, your dream is a good omen. The dream is precious and abodes us well. My friend, the mountain you saw could not be Hambaba. We shall capture Hambaba, him we shall slay. We shall cast down his corpse on the field of battle, and next morning we shall see a good sign from the sun god. So you see, there are some lacuna in Gilgamesh's description of the first dream, but you immediately see that he's not dreaming something great, right? I was dreaming about this unsurpassable rugged mountain just coming down on us, right? And then Enkidu's response is, don't worry about it, my friend. It is a great sign. Isn't it interesting how Enkidu is repetitiously telling Gilgamesh that I don't think I'm sleeping very well, and I'm seeing these like overwhelming nightmare, and Enkidu is keep repeating, oh my friend, this is a good omen. Don't worry about it. We will be able to actually accomplish this. How do you read this scene? You know, it seems like a mountain is quite clear that it is a kind of overwhelming presence. So I'm giving you this image of mountain in the back of this lecture. It is something that overwhelms us so much that it symbolizes our inability to conquer, right? It's something that we cannot move, something that we cannot surpass, and it is falling down upon us. I don't know, sometimes this is something that happens to me, but also my friends. You know, sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night by thinking that I have to take this math exam, and suddenly you realize that you didn't study the section that you're supposed to, and you wake up in the middle of the night or wake up in the morning thinking, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that it was a dream. You know, like sometimes I remember my father used to tell me that he was already got a job for one of the big companies in Tokyo, and he had to finish 5 or 6 classes in the last semester of the university, and he continued to dream about the final exam that he had to take for one of these 5 classes, right? Because if you fail that exam, you won't be able to actually start the new job. It is a kind of pressure, you know, that you feel, and that pressure actually blows up into your dream, even after you finish the college or you never have to take the math exams ever again. I think it's something similar to that. It is overwhelming project that is almost looks impossible, and it pressures us to do well and surpass it. And because of that, it shows up in our subconsciousness and it shows up in our dream, right? But this dream in ancient Mesopotamian tale has a certain structure and symbolisms. So let's take a look at the second dream. Gilgamesh goes through the same ritual of, at 20 leagues they broke bread, at 30 leagues they pitched camp. Facing the sun, they dug a well, they put fresh water in, so on and so forth, right? And then, again, Gilgamesh sees a dream and he's yanked out of his sleep's end. This is middle of page 32, BO 212. My second dream surpasses the first. In my dream, my friend, a mountain, it threw me down, it held me by my feet. The brightness grew more intense. A man appeared, the comeliest in the land, his beauty. From beneath the mountain, he pulled me out and he gave me water to drink. My heart grew calm. On the ground, he set my feet. He says the second dream surpasses the first. So the meaning of the dream is getting more and more intense. In the second dream, he sees this person or man, right? But it literally captured his feet. So there's a sense of direct contact between this mountain personified as this bright man. And then Enkidu's response again is interpreting this dream into something positive. Enkidu spoke to him, saying to Gilgamesh, "My friend Vishal, he's different altogether. Hambaba is not the mountain, he's different altogether. Come, cast aside your fear." And then again, at 20 leagues they broke bread, continued this journey. Right? So sometimes journey is this repetition of ordeal. You have to keep going, keep reading, keep writing, right? In philosophy program. Enkidu made for Gilgamesh a house of the dream god. They went through the same ritual again, and then the third dream comes in, tablet 4, line 100. "The dream that I had was an utter confusion. Heaven cried aloud, while earth did rumble. The day grew still, darkness came forth. There was a flash of lightning, fire broke out. The flames flared up, death rained down, and the flashes of fire went out where it had fallen turned into cinder. You were born in the wild, can we take counsel?" Having heard the words of his friend, Enkidu gave the dream meaning, saying to Gilgamesh, "My friend, your dream is a good omen. Fine is its message." So now Gilgamesh started to see fire, flashing light, and everything is on flame. "We draw, my friend, ever nearer the forest. The dreams are close, the battle soon. You will see the radiant auras of the god of Hambaba, whom in your thoughts you fear so much. Locking horns like a bull, you will batter him, and force his head down with your strength. And all man you saw is your powerful God, the one who begot you, divine Lagalbanda." Then goes on to the fourth dream. This is OBNI 10 in middle of page 35. "My friend, I have had the fourth. It surpasses my other three dreams." So layer by layer, the dream becomes more intense. "I saw a thunderbird in the sky. Up it rose like a cloud, soaring above us." Do you notice how the dream is starting from a little bit abstract to becoming more concrete? It started to have more symbolisms and concretion of the images. "Up it rose like a cloud, soaring above us. Its visage distorted, its mouth was fire, its breath was death. There was also a man, he was strange of form. He stood there in my dream. He bound its wings and took hold of my arm. He cast it down before me upon it. You saw a thunderbird in the sky. Up it rose like a cloud, soaring above us. Its visage distorted." And Enkidu continues to repeat the same line. "The man you saw was mighty Shamash." Don't worry, my friend. What you're seeing is concrete image of what is supporting us, what is great. Do not worry. "My friend, favorable is your dream. Hambaba like will be kindled upon him. We shall bring about his. We shall bind his wings," and so on and so forth. And a fifth dream. This is the beginning of page 37. "My friend, I had a dream, how ominous it was, how desolate, how unclear. I had taken me hold of a bull from the wild as it clove the ground with its bellows. The clouds of dust it raised thrust deep in the sky, and I, in front of it, leaned myself forward. Taking hold of and closed my arms, he extricated me by force, my cheek. He gave me water to drink from his water skin. The God, my friend, we are going against, he's not the wild bull, he's different altogether. The wild bull you saw was shining Shamash. He will grasp our hands in time of peril. The one who gave you water to drink from his skin was your God who respects you, divine Lagalbanda. We shall join forces and do something unique, a feat that never has been in the land." So for us to achieve something that has never been done is a great achievement, eternal fame. Comes with this distorted image or vision, right? Many people tell you that this can be done. What you're trying to achieve is crazy. You should not even think about the possibility of achieving that project. This happens in our society today as well. So think about Elon Musk sending few people to the space, right? Or think about Mars project, or think about any project that many people deemed impossible. Now it's becoming possible and becoming known. Think about any technological advancement that many people said that would be impossible. All the great inventors seem to be crazy people at the time, but in retrospect, we all praise them as the great pioneer, right? So this is something that happens in today as well. That if you're going to achieve some kind of eternal fame, that your project would look strange even to yourself. And friendship is something that enables you to put things in perspective and turn things into positive direction, according to the Epic of Gilgamesh. So, repetition of dreams shows this Thunderbar, Shamash, Hambaba, the symbolism that packed into these 5 dreams, and Enkidu repeatedly reinterprets these dreams as something positive. So in this journey, you see Gilgamesh is telling the content of dreams to Enkidu, right? And then Enkidu is responding as someone born from the wild, giving a meaning to this dream back to Gilgamesh. So there's kind of back and forth between 2 characters. So the friendship is about this interaction, right? Somewhere along the line of journey, this is quite interesting. This is tablet 239. The role reverse, sort of like a relationship between Gilgamesh and Enkidu, becomes opposite. Enkidu opened his mouth to speak, saying to Gilgamesh, "Have come down and my arms grow stiff." Gilgamesh opened his mouth to speak, saying to Enkidu, "Why, my friend, do we speak like weaklings? Was it not we crossed all of the mountains? Did not before us, before we withdraw, my friend, experience in combat through battle? You and you fear not. Like a dervish and change, let your shout resound like a kettle drum. Let the stiffness leave your arms, the tremors your knees. Take my hand, friend, and we shall go on together. Let your thoughts dwell on combat. Forget death, seek life. The careful man, let him who goes first be on guard for himself and bring his comrade to safety. It is they made a name for days long in the future." At the distance, the 2 of them arrived. They ceased their talking and came to a halt. So you see, they arrive at the forest of cedar, but what you see is a sort of mutual support of Gilgamesh and Enkidu. It's not just Gilgamesh giving the content of dreams to Enkidu, and Enkidu is interpreting in such a way that Enkidu supports Gilgamesh, but at the end of the journey, you see Gilgamesh supporting Enkidu. So you have this interwoven relationship between Gilgamesh and Enkidu throughout the process of journey. And then they arrive at the forest of cedar, which should look something like this from the sky. This is the cedar forest. But from the ground, it should look something like this, right? Really tall cedars, really tall trees, right? They come to the forest and they come to a halt, right? It's something that really impressive that they would have to stop. Now, the forest of cedar symbolizes nature, also untouched nature, like a kind of wild nature the human civilization has never entered. It was placed by gods, and it is secret abode of the ogre, Hambaba, right? So this is where they arrived. This is the kind of image that you should get from their arrival at the Forest of Cedars. And then take a look at the combat in Tablet 5, the combat with the Hambaba. They stood there marveling at the forest, gazing at the lofty cedars, gazing at the forest entrance where Hambaba came, and when there was a track. So you can see the images of them entering the forest. The path was straight, the way well trodden. They saw the mountain of cedar, seat of gods and goddesses throne. On the face of the mountain, the cedar proffered its abundance. Its shade was sweet and full of delight. So you have this really, really beautiful forest of cedar when they enter the abode of Hambaba. This is tablet 570. There's quite a bit of broken lines and missing lines in this section. And then you suddenly see this Enkidu open his mouth to speak, saying to Gilgamesh, tablet 5, line 70, "My friend Hambaba, 1-to-1, 2 garments, however even glacier slope, 2 climbing can conquer. 2, a 3-ply rope is not easily broken, even a mighty lion 2 cubs can overcome." So you have this image of joint force is unbreakable. It's a common tale in many cultural stories. Even in Japan, we have this famous general telling his 3 sons that are always fighting against each other and demonstrates with arrow. If you hold 1 arrow, it can be easily broken, but if you hold 3 arrows together, you won't be able to break them easily, or they are unbreakable. So join forces and they become unbreakable. So the symbolism of collaboration and join forces. And then enters Hambaba. This is the bottom of page 40. "We have come to a place where a man shouldn't go. Let us set our weapons in the gate of Hambaba." Enkidu declared to his friend, "A tempest onslaught is a ferocious Hambaba. Like the god of the storm, he will trample us down." Now, Hambaba is described as ogre, right? And ogre shows up in many different cultural descriptions. So this is a famous painting of ogre from 17th century by Italian painter Giovanni Lanfranco. Then you have this 19th century German illustration by Alexander Zick. This is also another description of ogre. It's something big and monstrous, right? And then you have 19th century Japanese conception of ogre. The different cultural setting has different conception of ogre. And this is a 20th century Disney version of ogre. You notice there are monsters, but also comical characters. It's not entirely pure evil. It is something that belongs to nature, uncivilized. So there's a contrast between human civilizations and this ragged wilderness, which is terrible to look at, which is hostile to humanity, but also has this element of comical character. Of course, the Disney version is much more friendlier than all the other ones, but you see the whole point of ogre. So Hambaba is described as this guardian of the forest of the cedar, placed by gods. It symbolizes not only the negative sense of destruction and death, but also a guardian. It protects the forest from human civilization. So there's a conflict between nature and human civilization in this section. Interestingly, he's also compared to the god of storm, Adad, right? He comes the second to the god of storm, Adad, and he is compared to the deluge, right? So Hambaba is both guardian of the forest of cedar, but also recognized as the symbolism of destruction. So you can see how the ancient Mesopotamian people conceive of nature as a source of natural disasters, but also it's a sacred place that are protected by the gods. So again, the conflict between Gilgamesh as the king and the foundation of human civilization on the one side, and Hambaba as the guardian of the forest of cedar, representing wild nature. There's a conflict between the two. And how do you communicate between these two poles? You need Enkidu, born in the wild. So this is the top of page 41, tablet 5, line 85. Hambaba opened his mouth to speak, saying to Gilgamesh, "Let fools take counsel, Gilgamesh, with the rude and brutish. Why have you come here into my presence? Come, Enkidu, you spawn of a fish, who knew no father, hatchling of terrapin and turtle, who sucked no mother's milk. In your youth I watched you, but near you I went not. Would you have filled my belly? Now in treachery you bring before me Gilgamesh, and stand there, Enkidu, like a warlike stranger. I will split the throat and the gullet of Gilgamesh. I'll feed his flesh to the locust bird, ravening eagle, and a vulture." Then Gilgamesh speaks, opened his mouth to speak, saying to Enkidu, "My friend Hambaba's features have changed, for he is cloaked in the 7 auras. Though boldly we came up to his lair to defeat him, yet my heart will not quickly." Enkidu opened his mouth to speak, saying to Gilgamesh, "Why, my friend, do you speak like a weakling? With your spineless words you make me despondent. Now, my friend, but one is our task. The copper is already pouring into the mold. To stoke the furnace for an hour, to the coals for an hour. To send the deluge is to crack the whip. Don't draw back, don't make a retreat. Make your blow mighty." So Enkidu plays on a medium between human civilization and nature, and you also see this reverse of the role where Enkidu is giving encouragement to Gilgamesh once more, going back and forth between Gilgamesh and Enkidu. But the crucial moment when the Gilgamesh tries to conquer Hambaba, he needs the support from Enkidu, born in the wild. Continue reading on. This is line 132. He smote the ground and faced him head on. At the heels of their feet, the earth burst asunder. They shudder as they whirled Mounts Sirion and Lebanon. Black came the clouds of white, raining down on them death like a mist. Shamash rised against Hambaba. The mighty gale winds, south wind, north wind, east wind, west wind, blast, counterblast, typhoon, hurricane, tempest, devil wind, frost wind, gale, and tornado. Do you remember this? This is exactly what Ninsun saw in her vision when she was offering prayer to Shamash, and Shamash actually delivered the promise. So Shamash is supporting Gilgamesh. There arose 13 winds, and the face of Hambaba darkened. He could not charge forwards, he could not kick backwards. The weapons of Gilgamesh then reached Hambaba. So you see a kind of conflict between Gilgamesh and Hambaba, but notice how Gilgamesh is supported by Shamash, and Hambaba is also placed by Enlil, which is the god of underworld. Not only two sides are fighting against each other, the symbolism of human civilization, a symbolism of nature in conflict against each other, but you also see a kind of affiliations between two camps. Right? So Shamash is siding the side of Gilgamesh. Enlil is citing the side of Hambaba. Now, some gave an interpretation that Shamash is the god of Larsa, the city, and Enlil is the god of Nippur, two cities in ancient Sumerian civilization. So you can see how two sides are actually fighting against each other, and perhaps it's telling us a kind of political history as well. We don't quite know whether this is true or not, but I think that's one possible interpretation. So the death becomes imminent to Hambaba. What does Hambaba do? Interestingly, he talks to Gilgamesh. In a plea for his life, said Hambaba to Gilgamesh, "You are so young, Gilgamesh, your mother just bore you, but indeed you are offspring of wild cow Ninsun. By Shamash's command, the mountains you flatten, all offshoot sprung from Uruk's mist, Gilgamesh the king. Gilgamesh, a dead man cannot alive for his lord. Spare my life, O Gilgamesh. Just spare my life, save me. Let me dwell here for you in the forest of cedar. Trees as many as you command, I will guard your mortal, timber to be the pride of your palace." So Hambaba is trying to bribe his way out, right? He said, look, if you save my life, I give you timbers. Now, this is the only picture I could find. It is more of a twigs than timbers. What is the Hambaba's timbers will look like? A forest of cedar, the tall trees will look like? It would have to look something like this, right? So this is the old picture of an ancient tree in the United States. These are the lumberjacks trying to cut down the tree, right? But this is something like he promised. I'm going to give you a timber, the natural resources, so long as you keep me here alive. What happens to this conversation between Hambaba and Gilgamesh? Enkidu steps in. This is line 156. Enkidu opened his mouth to speak. "Do not listen, my friend, to Hambaba's words. Ignore his supplications." Obviously, this guy is trying to wiggle his way out by bribing us, natural resources, and he will not provide these materials, so we should take him down, Enkidu says. Hambaba opened his mouth to speak, saying to Enkidu, "You are experienced in the ways of my forest, the ways, also you know all the arts of speech. I should have picked you up and hanged you from a sapling at the way into the forest. I should have fed your flesh to the locust bird, a ravening eagle, and a vulture. Now, Enkidu, my release lies with you. Tell Gilgamesh to spare my life." Enkidu opened his mouth to speak, saying to Gilgamesh, "My friend Hambaba, who guards the forest of cedar, finish him, slay him, do away his power." Hambaba, who guards the forest of cedar, finish him, slay him, do away his power, before Enlil the foremost hears what we do. So before the gods hear what we're gonna do, Enlil and Shamash, let's just slay Hambaba. Because Enkidu knows Hambaba, he knows that ogre is lying, and it gives this counsel to Gilgamesh that we should slay him before the gods will hear us. Continue on. This is line 236. Hambaba opened his mouth to speak, saying to Enkidu, "You sit before him like a shepherd, like his hireling doing his bidding. Now, Enkidu, my release lies with you. Tell Gilgamesh to spare my life." And then Enkidu doesn't listen to Hambaba and just told Gilgamesh to just finish this guy off, right? And then Hambaba heard and bitterly cursed them. Line 246. "May the pair of them not grow old. Besides Gilgamesh, his friend, none shall bury Enkidu. My friend, I speak to you, but you do not hear me." Enkidu opened his mouth to speak, saying to Gilgamesh, "While the curses, let those curses return to his mouth." And this is the bottom of page 45. "He took up his axe in his hand. He drew forth the dirk from his belt. Gilgamesh smote him in the neck. His friend Enkidu gave encouragement. He fell. The ravines did run with his blood. Hambaba, the guardian, he smote to the ground." This is line ISH, line 30. "He slew the ogre, the forest's guardian. At whose yell were sundered the peaks of Syrian and Lebanon. The mountains did quake, all the hillsides did tremble." Okay. And then they discovered this secret abode of the gods. This is line 39 and toward the end of page 46. Gilgamesh filling the trees, Enkidu choosing the timber. Enkidu opened his mouth to speak, saying to Gilgamesh, "My friend, we have felled a lofty cedar whose top thrusts up to the sky. I will make a door, 6 rods in height, 2 rods in breadth, 1 cubit in thickness, whose pole and pivot's top and bottom will be all of a piece." And they took all these natural resources away from the forest of cedar, took it back to Uruk by making a raft and also offering this door. Now, this is interesting. What does this door symbolize? It's interesting how they make a door from a tree. It becomes an important symbol in the next tablet. So think about what this door really means. Now we move on to the next tablet, tablet 6, which is about love and wisdom. So tablet 6 starts with the Ishtar and the bowl of heaven, right? Interestingly, it starts with this image of purification, of cleansing. Gilgamesh and Enkidu went to this long journey to slay Hambaba in the wild forest of cedar. So you can imagine he would look dirty and disgusting with the blood of Hambaba. And then he washed his matted hair, he cleaned his equipment, he shook his hair down over his back, cast aside his dirty gear, he clad himself in clean, wrapped cloaks around him, tied with a sash, then did Gilgamesh put on his crown. How does he look like? He looks beautiful, he looks handsome, he looks kingly, right? Do you notice? After the journey, old tyrannical Gilgamesh is no longer here. Here you have this image of a beautiful, handsome king that deserved to be wearing the crown. On the beauty of Gilgamesh, Lady Ishtar looked with longing. So the love sparks in the goddess of the city of Uruk, Ishtar. This is line 7. Come, Gilgamesh, be you my bridegroom. Grant me your fruits, O grant me, be you my husband, and I you a wife. Let me harness you a chariot of lapis lazuli and gold. Its wheels shall be gold, and its horns shall be amber. Driving lions in a team, mules of great size, enter a house amid sweet scent of cedar. As you enter a house, doorway and footstool shall kiss your feet. Kings, courtiers, and nobles shall kneel before you. Produce of mountain and lowland they shall bring you as tribute. Your goats shall bear triplets, your ewes shall bear twins, your donkey, when laden, shall outpace any mule. A horse shall gallop at the chariot in glory. No ox shall match yours at the yoke. What's going on here? Ishtar is trying to seduce Gilgamesh, right? It is the nature of love. So Ishtar is described as this Venus, Aphrodite of ancient Mesopotamian tale. It symbolizes love, but what does the love do in face of handsome, beautiful king? First, she says, like, if you become my husband, you get all these great things. So she started to talk about sweet things, right? She gives sweet words. You know, if you marry me, your house is going to be great. Everybody's going to love you. I'm going to bring you so many money that you won't be able to spend all of it. And your life is going to be great. How do you handle that? What are these things? These are empty promises, right? Love makes many empty promises. I don't know if you've ever been in a romantic relationship that when you look back, it was disastrous. This is precisely the kind of seduction or enchantment that we get from romantic relationship, right? So suppose you have a friend who fell in love with somebody, you don't understand why. So suppose my friend A is completely head over heels toward another person B. And I don't understand why my friend A is interested in B. B is a horrible person. He or she has never done anything that she actually says. She's actually quite nasty. Her personality is not great, or his personality is not great. It doesn't really matter. You don't think B deserves to be with your friend A. Does that make sense? Suppose you have this friend that's completely falling in love with somebody else, but he doesn't see or she doesn't see that this person deserves their attention. Right? This is precisely the situation you are in Ishtar. Ishtar is giving these sweet words and making empty promises. In fact, in life, this happens a lot, right? So, for instance, when I was in college, I had this friend who fell in love with this boyfriend, and I knew that this guy doesn't deserve her, my friend. Or I can talk about my own past. Like, if you look back, you know, if you ask any professor, they probably be able to tell you one or two examples that describes how that relationship wasn't great, and they tell you that you shouldn't repeat that kind of relationship if you ask them a life advice, right? So when you get old, you'll be able to actually see it. But when you're young, when you're going through this motion of love, it's very difficult to decipher what are the sweet words and what are the actual promises and what are the empty promises that sound sweet but turn sour. How does Gilgamesh respond to these sweet words? And you see the growth of Gilgamesh after the journey to the forest of cedar. So Gilgamesh opened his mouth to speak, saying to Lady Ishtar, this is the bottom of page 48, "And if indeed I take you in marriage, body and clothing, where would come my food and my sustenance? Would you feed me bread that is fit for a god, and pour me ale that is fit for a king? Who is there would take you in marriage, you, a frost that congeals no ice, a louvre door that stays not breeze nor drought, a palace that massacres warriors, an elephant which in food its hoots, bitumen that stains the hands of its bearer, water skin that cuts the hands of its bearer, limestone that weakens the wall of ashlar, battering ram that destroys the walls of the enemy, a shoe that bites the foot of its owner. What bridegroom of yours did endure forever? What brave warriors of yours went up to the heavens?" So at this point, Gilgamesh represents the idea of reason. How do we know that he cultivated reason? Because he speaks with a metaphor. This is something that you should do in a philosophy paper as well. Sometimes when you write a philosophy paper, you describe a scene or you describe the concept, right? So you're reading medieval philosophy or modern philosophy, and then you'll be reading treatise. Or if you're reading ancient philosophy, suppose you're reading Plato, and then you're reading dialogues. So you have to describe the conversation or scenes from Plato's dialogues, and then describe ideas. Or you summarize the idea from medieval and modern or contemporary philosophy texts. After describing the idea from these philosophical texts, you have to use examples to demonstrate that you understood these concepts. So let's say I see the concept of tyranny from Epic of Gilgamesh, or I see the concept of friendship from Epic of Gilgamesh. But unless you can give me a life example or example that actually fits with concept, that concept could be just purely abstract and it has no practical applications or no practical context. In fact, it's not a concrete concept at all, that it's something that we came up with, but it has no meaning in reality, right? So the example shows that your capacity to ground the concept or you concretize the concept in life context. So it's very important for you to be able to use the right examples. I'll explain this much more in details when I assign a paper or when I comment on your journal. But this is something that shows that someone has a reason when that person can put the abstract concept in a concrete framework. Okay? So you see the Gilgamesh using metaphor to decipher the empty promises of loving Ishtar. Then he goes on to talk about the history of Ishtar's last relationships. I mean, sometimes, is that a great idea for you to date that person or not? Relies on the history of that person, right? If that person has been cheating on all the other relationship, there's a high probability that that person will cheat on you too, right? So Gilgamesh is exercising this reasonable assumption of what would happen to the person who is married to Ishtar. Come, let me tell you the tale of your lovers. This is line 45. Doomsday, the lover of your youth, year upon year, to lamenting you doomed him. You loved the speckled Alilabard, but struck him down and broke his wing. Now he stands in the woods crying, my wing. You loved the lion, perfect in strength, but for him you dug 7 pits and 7. You loved the horse so famous in battle, but you made his destiny whip, spar, and lash. You made his destiny a 7-league gallop. You made his destiny to drink muddy water, and doomed Selili, his mother, to perpetual weeding. You loved the shepherd, the grazier, the herdsman, who gave you piles of loaves baked in embers, and slaughtered the kids for you day after day. You struck him, turned him into a wolf. Now his very own shepherd boys chase him away, and his dogs take bites at his haunches. So you see how love's sweet words quickly turn into sour, empty promises, or packed with sour contradictions. Right? These are the examples of contradictions. Of something is admired, heroic, powerful is turned into miserable and humble, or even contradiction. Shepherd is turning into a wolf that the shepherd boys would have to chase him away. That is a great image. There's another guy, Ishilanu. This image is quite graphic, right? The Ishtar actually sexually harassed one of the servants that is really doing a respectable job for her. So you now see how Gilgamesh, by using examples and historical evidences to prove that the Ishtar's sweet words are in fact empty promises. So you see the split between love and wisdom in this tablet 6. So what does Ishtar do? She gets angry and goes to her father Anu. When the irrational, empty promises are proven to be irrational, their responses are also irrational in the sense that they become really angry and they go to the Anu, the sky god. Give me the bow of heaven to revenge on this just pure resentment. Let me take down this reason and wisdom. Let me do this, Father, right? What does Anu do? The goddess Ishtar, this is line 80, heard these words. She went up to the heaven in a furious rage. Weeping, she went to Anu, her father, before unto her mother. Her tears did flow. O father, again and again does Gilgamesh scold me, telling a tale of a false slander about me and insults too. Anu opened his mouth to speak, saying to the lady Ishtar, but was it not you who provoked King Gilgamesh? So he told a tale of false slander about you and insults? Ishtar opened her mouth to speak, saying to her father Anu, Father, give me please the bow of heaven, so in his dwelling I may slay Gilgamesh. If you do not give me the bow of heaven, I shall smash the gates of the netherworld right down to its dwelling. To the world below I shall grant manumission. I shall bring up the dead to consume the living. I shall make the dead outnumber the living. So when love goes into the rage against reason, what it tries to accomplish is pure destruction. It's just trying to turn the entire world upside down. How does Anu, sky god, respond to that kind of rage? He basically says like, but Gilgamesh actually has a point, right? I see Gilgamesh did exactly what you did. There's nothing in what Gilgamesh said is wrong. But is Ishtar capable of listening to that reason? Absolutely no, right? So Anu's decision was to say like, look, I give you the bow of heaven, do what you want to do, but with one condition. This is line 101. Anu opened his mouth to speak, saying to the lady Ishtar, if you want from me the bow of heaven, let the widow of Uruk gather 7 years chaff, and the farmer Uruk grow 7 years hay. The bow of heaven symbolizes drought, famine, and epidemic. Sky god Anu realizes it's impossible to suppress the anger of the love. He lets the love enrage itself. Let the emotion explode, but let's not kill anybody. So it's okay for you to feel this way, but you do not entirely destroy the foundation of the Uruk, the sheepfold. The human civilization should be protected at the end. So bow of heaven represents drought, famine, epidemic. How does the description look like? As the bow of heaven snorted, the pit opened up, 100 men of Uruk fell down it. The second time it snorted, the pit opened up, 200 men of Uruk fell down it. The third time it snorted, the pit opened up, and Enkidu fell in as far as his waist. Enkidu sprung up and seized the bull by the horns. In his face, the bull spat slaver with the tuft of its tail. So it looks like something like this, right? There's a crack on the ground because of the drought, and there's an epidemic and people dying like a tree, and this is like the entire field is cracked with this drought. This is the image of the bow of heaven just shining blazing heat to the ground. Crops are dying, people are dying, and there is an epidemic. So what is the stop to this disaster? When the irrational love turns into anger and we let the emotion rule itself, it's okay. You can't just suppress that emotion, so you have to let it go. But how do we combat that emotion? According to the Epic of Gilgamesh, is friendship. First, we recognize Shamash is on the side of reason, and Anu is also on the side of reason, right? But what enables this reason to conquer love, or to balance the love and reason together, according to the Epic of Gilgamesh, is the presence of Enkidu. Enkidu opened his mouth to speak, saying to Gilgamesh, his friend. This is top of page 52, line 128. My friend, we vaunted ourselves in our city. How shall we answer the thronging people? My friend, I have tested the might of the bow, so learning its strength and knowing its purpose, let me test again the might of the bow. I shall get myself behind the bow of heaven. I will seize it by the tuft of the tail. I will set my foot on the back of its leg. Then you, like a butcher, brave and skillful, between the yoke of the horns, the slaughter spot thrusting your knife. Then Gilgamesh, like a butcher, brave and skillful, between the yoke of the horns and the slaughter spot, he thrust in his knife. After they had slain the bull of heaven, they bore its heart aloft and set it before Shamash. So they take down the bull of heaven, took the heart, and offer it to Shamash, who is on the side of reason. Stepping back, they fell prostrate in the presence of the sun god. Then both of them together sat down. Ishtar went up on the wall of Uruk the sheepfold. Hopping and stamping, she wailed in woe. Alas, Gilgamesh, who mocked me, has killed the bull of heaven. Enkidu heard these words of Ishtar, and then tearing a haunch off the bull, he hurled it towards her. Had I caught you too, I would have treated you likewise. I would have draped your arms in its guts. So friendship and reason can conquer the tyranny of love. That's the message. This is interesting, right? So sometimes you almost want to give up. Your friend, your best friend is falling in love with the person that you don't think deserve your friend. But when you fall in love with somebody, you fall in love. You can't stop yourself from falling in love. That's the nature of love, right? And then you almost kind of give up. Like, why do you keep going back to this horrible ex-boyfriend, ex-girlfriend, ex-wife, ex-husband? How do you stop this nonsense? And then our reason basically said, like, no matter how much we reason with them, we can't stop them from going back to horrible exes, right? But ancient Mesopotamian tell us, like, no, it's not possible to stop it. So you have to have that emotion, let it go. But at the end of the day, reason and friendship can win over the irrationality of empty promises and sweet words of tyrannical love. That's a psychological interpretation of the bull of heaven, right? Interestingly, once bull of heaven is slayed, Ishtar and courtesans and prostitutes and harlots, so Shamhat is one of them, they are actually praying and practices rituals toward the dead body of bull of heaven. So there's a kind of resolution between love and reason at the end of this tablet. Then towards the end of tablet 6, you see the Gilgamesh becoming the finest. Right? Gilgamesh spoke a word to the serving girls of his palace. This line, 171. Who is the finest among men? Who the most glorious of fellows? Gilgamesh is the finest among men. Gilgamesh, the most glorious of fellows. Gilgamesh made merry in his palace. Gilgamesh finally becomes this finest human being, the finest king that deserves the name of a hero, deserves the name of great king, the founder of city. If the epic of Gilgamesh ended here at the line 179, this is almost like the Disney movie of Happily Ever After, right? So hero conquered his own tyranny, made a great friend, went to the forest of cedars to conquer this ogre, and then he became the finest king by conquering the famine and drought and epidemic, and even make a resolution with love. Gilgamesh married Mary in his palace. Interestingly, this is not where it ends. The one more stanza that puts this entire epic into a completely different tack. Well, in fact, things get more interesting from here, right? This is the end of tablet 6. At night, the men lay asleep on their beds, and Enkidu, as he slept, was having a dream. Enkidu rose to relate the dream, saying to his friend. So here, Enkidu enters the dream where Hambaba's curse is materialized through this vision, which takes us to the next section of mortality. Tablet 7, the death of Enkidu. This is where the notion of death becomes relevant to the epic of Gilgamesh. I remember the end of tablet 6 ends with this Enkidu. He's awakened from his dream like Gilgamesh was during the journey, right? My friend, this is the beginning of tablet 7. Why were the great gods in council? Enkidu began to speak to Gilgamesh, my brother. This night, what a dream I dreamed. The gods Anu, Enlil, Ere, and a celestial Shamash held assembly, and Anu spoke unto Enlil. These because they slew the bull of heaven and slew Hambaba, that guarded the mountains dense wooded with cedar. So said Anu, between these two let one of them die. And Enlil said, let Enkidu die, but let not Gilgamesh die. And remember, this is precisely the curse that Hambaba gave before he was killed by Gilgamesh and Enkidu, right? Celestial Shamash began to reply to the hero Enlil. Was it not at your word that they slew him, the bull of heaven, and also Hambaba? Now shall innocent Enkidu die. Now it's very strange that he's actually talking to Enlil. It should be more like Anu or Shamash. Enlil speaks to Shamash, right? So there's something strange about this tablet. Enlil was wroth at the celestial Shamash. How like a comrade you march with them daily. Enkidu lay down before Gilgamesh. His tears flowed down like streams. Oh, my brother, dear to me is my brother. They will never raise me up again for my brother. Among the dead I shall sit, the threshold of the dead I shall cross. Never again shall I set eyes on my dear brother. Remember, at the end of the journey to the forest of cedar, they took one of the biggest timber and then made a door and used it as offering to the gods. They conquered Hambaba before the gods would know, but then as they plundered the forest of cedar, they decided to make an offering to the gods. And it was that symbolism of the door. And it begins to play an important role. Enkidu lifted his eyes as though to the door. He talked with the door as if with the man. O door of the woodland that has no sense, I have understanding that you have not. For 20 leagues I sought for you, the finest timber, until in the forest I found a tall cedar. Your tree had no rival in the forest of cedar. 6 rods is your height, 2 rods your breadth, 1 cubit your thickness. Your pole and your pivots, top and bottom, are all of a piece. I fashioned you, I lifted you, I hung you in nipple. Had I but known, O door, that so you would repay me, had I but known, O door, that you would reward me, I would have lifted my axe, I would have cut you down, I would have floated you down as a raft to Ebabara. So, first of all, you have this God's assembly making a decision that Enkidu die, but let not Gilgamesh die. And then Enkidu in tears talked to Door, which symbolizes some kind of offering to the gods after they conquer Hambaba and plunder the forest of cedar. And then he curses this Door. And then Gilgamesh responds to Enkidu also in tears. This is the bottom of page 56. My friend in preeminent, the youth who had understanding and reason now speak profanity. Why, my friend, does your heart talk profanity? The dream was special, great anxiety. Your feverish lips were buzzing like flies. The misgivings were great. The dream was rare. To the one who survives, the gods leave grieving. The dream leaves sorrow. To the one who survives, the great gods I'll beseech in supplication. Let me seek out Shamash. I'll appeal to your God. Right, remember that conversation between Enkidu and Gilgamesh during the journey? Gilgamesh had a dream and Enkidu interpreted it and said, no, this is a good omen. In fact, that dream was also about Enkidu. That's the thing that you didn't quite understand when you're reading the journey, but later it becomes clear that what they are dreaming about has something to do with Enkidu as much as it had something to do with the Gilgamesh, because they are friends, they are like brothers. In this case, Enkidu had a dream, the terrible dream that I'm going to die. And Gilgamesh gives a meaning to the dream, but in fact, he doesn't interpret it to mean something positive. Right? He said, look, I'm sorry this is happening, but I don't think it's a good thing for you to curse. But you know what I can do for you, Enkidu, my friend and my brother, is that I'll talk to the gods and then build a gold statue of you after you die. Does that make sense? So look, Enkidu, you're gonna die. I don't think I'm gonna be able to change that, but at least I can talk to the gods because I'm 2/3 divine. I'll talk to them so they take good care of you. And also, we're going to make a gold statue out of you after you die. Do you think this is enough to make a consolation to the person who is dying? Think about that, right? Ancient Mesopotamian tale seemed to suggest that this is not good enough, right? But at least that's Gilgamesh's response to his friend's premonition of his own death. He foresees that he has to die, and then Gilgamesh's response was like, okay, I'll talk to the gods. Let me build you a statue. So how does Enkidu respond to this? Gilgamesh's suggestion. This is line 85. My friend, Enkidu speaks to Gilgamesh. My friend, give no silver, give no gold, give no. Enkidu immediately said, it's pointless for you to pay any money to the gods. Do not spend this money. You cannot carry to the other side. The word Enlil spoke is not like the gods. What he commands, he doesn't erase. What he sits down, he doesn't erase. My friend, fixed is my destiny. People go to their doom before their time. At the very first glimmer of brightening dawn, Enkidu lifted his head, lamenting to Shamash. Under the rays of the sun, his tears were flowing. I appeal to you, Shamash, for my life so precious as for the hunter, the trapperman, who let me be not as great as my friend. Again, Enkidu enters this mode of speaking to Shamash, and then he begins to curse everything that made him where he is. First, he curses Hunter, who spotted him in the wild. Then, in length, he curses Shamahat. In fact, this is quite mean, right? That the junction of highways shall be where you sit. This is line 116. A field of ruins shall be where you sleep. The shadow of the rampart shall be where you stand. Thorn and briar shall skin your feet. Drunk and sober shall strike your cheek, shall be plaintive and claim against you. The roof of your house no builder shall plaster. In your bedroom the owl shall roost. At your table never shall banquet take place. It's like, screw you, Hunter. Screw you, Shamhat. Because of you, I'm here. And because of you, this is where I am. Because you made me weak, who was undefiled. Yes, in the wild you weakened me, who was undefiled. So he seemed to say that by cultivating reason and wide understanding, by going through this process of taming, remember, by having a friend, terror has entered my heart, right? Enkidu experienced for the first time the notion of being alone. Loneliness came to his heart for the first time by cultivating his understanding and reason. He was alienated from nature. His body was defiled. So in this process of becoming part of human existence, he recognizes solitude and then he recognizes this death. So it is human nature to be able to recognize that our life is timed. We are dying life. This is a part of reason and understanding, right? And then he started to curse everything that puts him in that position. If I didn't have a reason and understanding, if I didn't go through this entire journey to become a great human being, right? In fact, one of the greatest human beings of all time, I don't have to experience this meaningless death. So he curses everyone. Then Shamash reasons with Enkidu. This is almost like a classical argument against morality. So for instance, say there's a concept of good and bad. Because of that, we know that our situation is bad. So we should get rid of the concept of good and bad, and nobody would have to suffer from anything. But Shamash's response is something like this. The condition for the possibility for you to recognize the badness of the situation, you have to have a concept of morality. You have to be able to cultivate understanding and a reason to be able to see what you're losing. So if I didn't cultivate reason and understanding, I didn't have to suffer this loss like I do now. Yeah, maybe. But condition for the possibility to recognize loss, the gain that you're going to lose, is because you cultivated reason and understanding, right? So you can't get rid of morality because you don't like the concept of bad. In fact, the concept of morality is requisite for the possibility for us to recognize something being bad. Something like that. So Shamash is given quite classical, reasonable argument against Enkidu by saying that, Enkidu, I understand that you feeling sad about losing everything, but the fact that you had everything is because of them. So Enkidu turns his curse into blessing. So he started bless hunters and then he started to bless Shamha in length. Now let's pause for a second here. Does that make sense that someone is going through a difficult time in their lives, or in fact they are facing a terminal illness and they recognize the life that they are losing? At that moment, their life becomes both curse and blessings, like a pharmacon, right? Something can be positive and negative at the same time. I think in many cases we stay within the realm of a curse, right? Why am I going through this difficult time and why am I losing my life so young? So it's difficult to bless what you have. But there's a kind of turning point. According to the Epic of Gilgamesh, there is capacity for us to recognize same life as a blessing as much as a curse. And facing death, that's the two extreme positions in relation to the same life that we lived. So this is the Epic of Gilgamesh's understanding of what does death do to the people's understanding of life. After blessing Shamhat by taking advice of Shamash, Enkidu goes to think about things, right? As for Enkidu, this is line 162, tablet 7. As for Enkidu, his mind was troubled. He lay on his own and began to ponder. What was on his mind, he told his friend, My friend, in the course of the night, I had such a dream. The heavens thundered, the earth gave echo, and there was I standing between them. A man there was, grim his expression, just like a thunderbird, his features were frightening. His hands were a lion's paw, his claws an eagle's talons. He seized me by the hair, he overpowered me. I struck him, but back he sprang like a skipping rope. He struck me like a raft, capsized me. Underfoot, he crushed me like a mighty wild bull, drenching my body with poisonous slaver. Save me, my friend, you are afraid of him, but you, lacuna. He struck me, turned me into a dove. He bound my arms like the wings of a bird to lead me captive to the house of darkness, seat of Irukala. To the house which none would enter, ever leaves on the path that allows no journey back. So this is the first instance of the description of death. But you also notice how the dream that Gilgamesh had during his journey to the forest of cedar become materialized again here as a part of the dream that Enkidu has. And here, there's the first description of death in human literature. Unfortunately, the image is incomplete. And then end of tablet 7, Gilgamesh speaks, "My friend saw a vision which will never be equaled. The day he had the dream, his strength was exhausted. Enkidu was cast down. He lay one day sick, and then a second. Enkidu lay on his bed. His sickness worsened. A third day and a fourth day, the sickness of Enkidu worsened. A fifth day, a sixth, and a seventh, and eighth, a ninth, and a 10th, the sickness of Enkidu worsened. An 11th day and a 12th, Enkidu lay on the bed. He called for Gilgamesh and spoke to his friend. My gut has taken against me, my friend. I do not like one who falls in the midst of battle. I was afraid of a combat, and my friend, one who falls in combat makes his name. But I do not fall in combat, and shall make not my name." Remember, the whole idea of the conquest of the forest of cedar is to achieve eternal fame. Now, Enkidu here is dying of illness. So we have to think about this. This reminds me of a scene in Tolstoy's War and Peace, where one of the characters described the suffering of humanity. Basically, the line compares two people. One is a king who is in this beautiful coffin with the flowers and jewelries, and then another one is a beggar who died in the street. Tolstoy basically said the suffering of these two are equal. It really makes me think about this. Like, after achieving all this great journey and achieving this eternal fame, at the end of the day, all of us die like Enkidu. Enkidu dies with a sickness, and there's a sense of emptiness or a sense of suffering that sort of cancels everything that you've ever done. So yes, of course, Enkidu goes into cursing of everyone and blessing of everyone, but the final scene of tablet 7 seems to suggest that, look, these names are just meaningless. I cannot take any of the things to the other side of the life's door. Once the life's door is closed and I enter the realm of the dead, all the achievement that we made in this life really doesn't matter. At the end of the day, I'm dying with a sickness, and I do not make any name out of doing this. So there's a great sense of sadness at the end of this scene, right? At tablet 7. And then tablet 8 is about this funeral, the funeral of Enkidu. Since we are pushing the time limit here, so let me briefly go through the tablet 8. Basically, Gilgamesh tells the whole world to mourn for Enkidu, right? May the elders of Uruk mourn for Enkidu. Okay, here. This is line 9. May the elders teeming Uruk the sheepfold mourn you. May the crowd who gave us their blessings mourn you. May the high peaks of hills and mountains mourn you. May the pastures lament like your mother. Blah, blah, blah. May the whole world mourn you. So basically, Gilgamesh is telling the whole existence, declaring to the world that we should be sad about the death of Enkidu. So you feel sad with me right now, right? Is it about the whole world? It doesn't look like, right? It just shows how much sadness that he's experiencing. Because at the end of this process, he says, this is line 42. Oh, hear me, O young men, hear me. Hear me, O elders of Temin Uruk. Hear me. I shall weep for Enkidu, my friend, like a hired mourner woman. I shall bitterly wail. Right? So may the whole world mourn you, but more importantly, I feel sad. Right? That's the basic gist of this scene. And then page 65, this is line 50. Suddenly, it turns to this question of, what is this sleep that has seized you? It raises this philosophical question of death. Oh, my friend, wild ass on the run, donkey of the uplands, panther of the wild. My friend Enkidu, wild ass on the run, donkey of the uplands, panther of the wild. Having joined forces, we climbed the mountains, seized and slew the bull of heaven, destroyed Hambaba, who dwelt in the forest of cedar. Now, what is this sleep that has seized you? You become unconscious. You do not hear me, but he lifted not his head. He felt his heart, but it beat no longer. He covered like a bride the face of his friend. Like an eagle, he circled around him. Like a lioness deprived of her cubs, he paced to and fro, this way and that. So immediately you have this image of Gilgamesh asking this question of unconsciousness, sleep that takes over the human beings once we die, right? Why are you in this eternal dream? Why are you in this state of sleep that you will never be able to come back? And you can see him going back and forth over the dead body of Enkidu like animals, right? Animals, when they lose their children, they do in fact feel this loss of their natural affections, and they mourn for their lost ones sometimes. Not always, but sometimes, right? So you see this animalistic Gilgamesh going back and forth over the dead body of Enkidu here. It's a great scene. His curly hair he tore out in clumps. He ripped off his finery like something taboo. He cast it away. At the very first glimmer of brightening dawn, Gilgamesh sent forth a call to the land. So you can see him pulling his hair out, tear his fine clothes off. You can see that he's just kind of entering this mess, right? And then he tried to commemorate, make these statues as he declared, right? He spends gold and lapis lazuli and all these beautiful things, make an offering. May the great queen Ishtar accept this. May Shamash accept this. And he pays everyone. So basically he practices this commemoration. But this funeral ritual and a commemoration should really make us think about this philosophical question of what is the sleep that has seized you? Okay? Now it looks like Gilgamesh is practicing a negotiation with the dead. So he's talking with the gods. So he's negotiating with and for the dead in a sense that, look, gods, please take care of this guy because he's passing from this life to the other world. So hear me, people, we should mourn for this guy. And hear me, gods, please take care of my friend because he's traveling to the other side of life, right? My question to you, and you are probably asking the same question, does that have any meaning? This commemoration and funerals? It seems like Gilgamesh is negotiating with the gods about the dead and negotiating with the dead world. But in Japanese, we have this expression called shinin ni kuchi nashi. It literally means the dead does not have a mouth. This is an expression to say that the dead cannot speak as a witness. In other words, they cannot be put in a trial because they cannot be a witness to anything and speak for themselves. So this is a Japanese expression. But isn't it the case that we can never bring the dead back to life? And, do they really care what we say about them from this side of life? I think that's the shorter version of this question. So we have these practices everywhere in the world. This is a beautiful memorial in Marseille, South France. You have this memorial of miraculous pine tree from Japan. This is the pine tree that survived the great East Japan earthquake. So another memorial. And this is another memorial from Bosnia-Herzegovina. Definitely has this image of a war, right? That they suffered a great destruction. So you have these memorials. But what these memorials do, right? So we've been practicing since the beginning of human existence. But what does this do? Is this something that we do to appease our conscience? Are these things done for the sake of the living? Or are these things actually have a meaning for the dead? How do we make sense of these things in the context of philosophy? So that's something that you should think about from this scene of a funeral and a commemoration. Okay, concluding questions. First question is this. What do you think is the function of a dream? So we have seen this sort of a swing motion between dream and reality in earlier tablets. In this reading assignment, we also saw this function of dream as giving us the future and also a kind of process of giving meanings between friends. So what do you think is the function of dream in Epic of Gilgamesh? And how is it related to the notion of death, at least in the context of the Epic of Gilgamesh and also in your reading of this story? Second question, what is the point of a commemoration of funeral? I already asked this question at the end of the tablet 8. But I think this is a very important question to ask. We practice these commemorations and funerals, and sometimes we do this in the context of religion, or sometimes we do this in a secular context. But we have to ask this question of what is the significance of these things? Are we just doing these things to express our sadness, but it has nothing to do with the dead? Or does it actually have positive significance for the people who actually died? What is the function of the funeral and a commemoration? Is there any point to the commemoration or funeral that is beyond just making us feel better? I think that's a really good question to ask in the context of philosophy or religion or in the context of ancient philosophy. Finally, what is the relation of love, curse, anger, wisdom, and death? So we've seen these concepts of love, reason, curse, blessing, anger, so on and so forth. But you have to start thinking about interrelations of multiple concepts since we are entering toward the end of Epic of Gilgamesh. So it's important for us to pay attention to each concept and pay attention to details of the symbolisms that weave each of these concepts. Now it is time for us to start paying attention to how they interrelate with each other and what kind of concepts, what kind of meaning they are trying to convey. So instead of talking about notion of love, notion of reason and understanding, we can see how reason and understanding can be bridged with each other or reconciled through the notion of friendship. So for instance, okay? So it is time for you to start focusing on the interrelations between these different concepts within the story of the Epic of Gilgamesh. Okay, on that note, I'd like to finish this lecture. Thanks again for attending at this lecture till the end. I'm looking forward to corresponding with you over these topics and reading your questions and ideas. Have a nice weekend and see you next week.